Hello, this is Dick Mitchell of St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Highland, Maryland, continuing my series on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. This is part 3. Part 3 is about Jerusalem. Jerusalem the Golden, the city of David. From Psalm 122, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. Certainly, no street in the world excites such concerns and emotions as Jerusalem. For many of us, it's the focus of any trip to the Holy Land. If we, in our lifetime, are offered the opportunity to travel to see only one place on the entire earth, maybe that one place should be Jerusalem. The city has 3,000 years of history, and that history continues. The city is full of religion and politics. There is simply no place comparable on earth. So we'll begin by defining Jerusalem. First, there is the Old City, that historic city surrounded by a great medieval stone wall enclosing about 1 square kilometer. Directly east of the Old City is the Mount of Olives, prominent in the Gospels and obvious in the topography. The Mount of Olives, along with the north and northeast, constitutes East Jerusalem, the Arab section. And this also includes some popular hotels and the Anglican Cathedral, St. George's. Then to the west is the New City, the Jewish city, built largely after the 1949 ceasefire, which divided Jerusalem between a Jewish west and an Arab east. This new city is a modern, first world metropolis, contrasting with the medieval flavor of the Old City or the third world quality of much of East Jerusalem. Now, dating from Ottoman times in the 19th century, the Old City is divided into 4 quarters: the Christian quarter, the Armenian quarter, the Jewish quarter, and the Muslim quarter. The Christian quarter contains the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, along with the prominent German Lutheran church with a great bell tower. Adjacent to the Christian quarter is the Armenian quarter. Now, the Armenians, of course, are Christian also, but they're not in communion with either the Roman Catholics or the Eastern Orthodox. After Saladin retook Jerusalem from the Crusaders in the 12th century, he imported an Armenian community to help repopulate the city, and there has been an Armenian presence ever since. The Christian and the Armenian quarters are largely institutional, with schools and churches, less residential. The Jewish quarter was badly damaged after the Arab capture of the Old City in the 1948 war. Historic synagogues were destroyed. After Israel recaptured the Old City in the Six-Day War, the Jewish quarter was rebuilt, and much of it today is much more modern with European-style shops and cafes. This is a picture of Beth and our 2022 guide, Suzanne, as we're having lunch in the Jewish quarter. Similarly, a picture of a shopping mall in the Jewish quarter. The only serious 20th century archaeology I've seen within the Old City walls has been in the Jewish quarter. You can see the remains of the ancient Roman city, its streets, and its buildings. Remember, of course, that the eastern boundary of the Jewish quarter is the western wall of the Temple Mount, the holiest place in Judaism, and I'll speak more about that shortly. The Muslim quarter includes the Temple Mount, and this quarter is heavily residential. It also includes the largest open-air markets. Indeed, the main north-south route extending from the Damascus Gate is a lengthy Middle Eastern bazaar where you can buy fresh meat to take home to grill for supper, or clothes for school kids, or souvenirs for pilgrims and tourists. This Arab market is a wonderful place to wander, and it's real. It's not a Disney recreation. You're in Jerusalem at the market. And although the religious life may be different and the location has changed, you may get the flavor of the market that Jesus faced when he challenged the vendors and the moneylenders on the temple grounds. Now, in my mind, the dominant place of the old city today is the Temple Mount, the large rectangular esplanade that occupies the east side of the city is illustrated in this map. It's on the right. That great plaza is 37 acres in size, about the equivalent of 28 football fields. It occupies some 15% of the entirety of the old city. So, what is the Temple Mount? Well, it was the ancient location of the Jewish temple. So, to review the history, the original temple was built by King Solomon in the 10th century before Christ. That temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in the 6th century BC. Then, some 70 years later, under the auspices of the new Persian Empire, the Jews built another temple, the Second Temple, on the same site. Now, that Second Temple stood down through the time of King Herod, who was a great builder himself, and he enhanced and decorated the temple, and probably he enlarged it. Clearly, by Jesus' time, it was an imposing structure. From Mark 13, and as Jesus came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings." Now, the temple itself stood on this great platform or plaza, and the main feature of Herod's work was the extension of this platform. He extended it to the south, which is towards the lower right in this image. Herod extended the plaza so that as the hill fell away, he built an extensive retaining wall, a great structure supporting the level plaza. This supporting structure is massive, with incredibly large stones, with 4 massive retaining walls to uphold and support the Temple Mount. And it has clearly worked, as the Temple Mount has remained in place these past 2,000 years. We think that much of this great esplanade or plaza during Jesus' time was the court of the Gentiles, that non-Jews could actually access the plaza, but there were additional walls around the temple structure itself, restricting that space only to Jews. But then the court of the Gentiles had been filled up by commercial ventures, money changers and animal vendors, and this is where Jesus carried out his temple cleansing. Then in AD 70, when the city fell to the Romans, there was fierce fighting in and around the entire temple compound. The Romans destroyed the temple building itself, pitching the stones over the side of the Temple Mount, where we can still see them today, but leaving the 37-acre esplanade or plaza very much in place. During the Byzantine era, when Christians controlled Jerusalem, they ignored the Temple Mount, treating it pretty much as a trash dump. Jerusalem then fell under Muslim control in the 7th century AD, and Jerusalem now became a Muslim holy city. Now, why is that? The Quran reports that Muhammad dreamt that he rode a flying horse from Mecca to the farthest mosque, and from there he ascended into the heavens to the throne of God himself. So where was this farthest mosque? That is, the farthest place of prayer, farthest from Mecca. The answer to this geographic riddle is the temple site in Jerusalem, which according to Muslim teachings has been a place of prayer since the time of the patriarch Abraham. So if Muhammad ascended in a vision to the throne of God from the site of the temple in Jerusalem, that made it a major holy place, appropriated really from the Jews. So the Muslims cleared the esplanade, and they eventually built two significant structures. First, in a Byzantine style, a shrine over a rock. This was understood to be the rock where Abraham prepared to sacrifice his son Ishmael. And it was also the approximate site of the Jewish temple, and is called the Dome of the Rock. The dome itself has been covered in gold in modern times, and it's really a central landmark in the old city. The second Muslim structure is a large mosque on the south side of the plaza. It is called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Al-Aqsa means farthest. Today, because of current day security concerns, non-Muslims are not permitted to enter the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but visitors may walk along the Great Plaza. It is a remarkable place. It's quiet, it's lovely, it's full of history and significance. To me, it seems very Turkish in appearance, reflecting its long control by the Ottomans. Here are our pilgrims, picture taken by our guide, Suzanne. The Dome of the Chain is another significant structure adjacent to the Dome of the Rock. Now, in 1967, Israel gained control of the Temple Mount when it captured the Old City. The Israelis made an agreement that the administrative control of the Temple Mount would remain with the Muslims through the Kingdom of Jordan, although Israel provides the actual security. The police on patrol are Israeli police, although they may well be Israeli Arabs. Another picture of the expanse of the plaza. Non-Muslims are welcome on Temple Mount 5 days a week from about 7 to 10 a.m. You have to clear security to enter, and the only entry point for non-Muslims is an elevated covered walkway on the west side, and it's just beyond the western wall. Now, Christians and Jews cannot pray on the Mount, and they cannot hold organized religious services or events there. In addition, Orthodox Jews are cautioned about entry on the Mount, that the glory of God that dwelt in the temple may not have completely left that space, and that if you as a visitor wander into that glory, you may be impacted or affected in unanticipated ways. Another picture of some of the structures on Temple Mount. Now, remember, as I said before, Temple Mount is supported by these 4 great retaining walls. Now, on the north side, the Mount is at street level, so the retaining wall is below ground. Then the eastern wall, this is the eastern wall. The eastern wall of Temple Mount is also the exterior wall of the city above the Kidron Valley. And that wall dates likely to Jesus' time or even earlier. I think Jesus would recognize that wall. Now, around the corner to the left is the southern wall. Now, there's another photograph from the Mount of Olives, and the southern wall is on the left. And here is a closer picture of the southern wall. The southern wall today is an exterior wall, but in Jesus' day, this was the chief entrance to the Temple Mount. And here we can see the actual ancient staircase up into the Temple Mount. There were gates there then. The southern wall, because it overlooks the lower portion of the hill, it really is the highest wall. So that when the devil, here we go, when the devil took Jesus to the pinnacle of the temple to offer to throw him off, this is usually understood to be the southeastern corner of the Temple Mount, the highest point on the Temple Mount and in the center of this slide. Then going around one more corner to the western wall. The western wall, of course, is inside the old city. This is the famous Western Wall, the holiest place in Judaism, where Jews gather to offer prayer, to study Torah, celebrate bar mitzvahs, and so forth. Of course, men and women are segregated. These photographs that I took are from the men's side. Here is our pilgrim to the women's side. It is a remarkable, fascinating location. So we've talked about Muslim and Jewish sites. What about Christian sites in the Old City? First, of course, is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now, the original church, built by the Emperor Constantine and larger than the current church, was destroyed by the mad caliph in the 11th century. And this is an artist's model of what we think that church looked like. The church was then rebuilt and was modified during the Crusader era, and the current structure reflects that time. But honestly, it is a crazy church. I've been there 3 times, and I'm always confused as to where I am. It's always full of people from all over the world, speaking many languages and with many tour guides. There is little visible management, and the place is regularly described as dark and spooky. If you want to find a quiet place to sit, to meditate, and to pray, you may be out of luck. Let me try to explain the site. The Gospels are clear that Jesus was crucified outside the city walls. Now, this church is clearly inside current city walls. It's in the Christian Quarter. But in truth, the walls have moved around. There is strong evidence that this church site was outside the walls at the time of Christ. Historians have concluded that King Herod Agrippa, working in the early AD 40s after the crucifixion, extended the city walls to the north and to the west and enclosed the hill called Golgotha. But in addition, remember that the burial site was near the crucifixion site. St. John, in his gospel, reports, now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb where no one had ever been laid. So because of the Jewish day of preparation, as the tomb was close at hand, they laid Jesus there. The Gospels make clear that time was precious, that Jesus' family and followers wanted to bury the body before the beginning of the Sabbath. And as they were pressed for time, they did not have the time to carry the body to a more distant location. So, is this a legitimate site? Well, when the Emperor Constantine's mother, St. Helena, came to the Holy Land in the 320s AD, she made inquiry as to the location of holy places. And it became clear that this specific site had long been revered by local Christians as the site of the resurrection. It is entirely reasonable to expect that the local Christian community would remember and reverence the site of Christ's resurrection. When the Emperor Hadrian destroyed and rebuilt the city back about 140 AD, he put a large Roman temple on this spot, probably to suppress Christian devotion. In addition, modern archaeology has discovered other rock-cut tombs in the area dated to the same period. So this does seem to be an area outside the city walls with rock-cut tombs. Well, what is left of Christ's tomb? The actual walls and roof of the tomb have long been destroyed. What is left, as we understand, is simply the floor or the bed of the alcove where Jesus' body lay. And that bed has long been covered for protection by a marble shelf. Then this structure is enclosed in a small building, originally built back in the 4th century AD and rebuilt several times. It's called the edicule. Edicule is Latin and means small building. The edicule itself sits within the rotunda of the larger church, directly under the church's dome. So you come into this dark medieval church, walk down under the dome, and encounter this small but elaborately decorated structure with a constant line of pilgrims going inside and coming out. So after a 20 or 30-minute wait in line, you can walk into the very small room, touch the marble covering, offer a prayer, and then leave promptly. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre also includes the traditional site of Golgotha, the hill of crucifixion. To get there, you must ascend a set of frighteningly narrow steps, and you reach this lovely Greek chapel. Here, pilgrims line up in order to kneel, reverence, and then crawl under this altar to a small hole in the floor where you insert your hand and touch the surface of the hill, which is now covered by a hard surface, presumably stone. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre has several other chapels and altars, but the edicule and the Golgotha altar are the chief points of interest. Now, our guide also showed us those recently found additional rock-cut tombs on the site near to Christ's tomb, lending credibility that this was a burial place. The church today is administered by 3 separate denominations: the Roman Catholics, the Greek Orthodox, and the Armenians. They work under a status quo arrangement that dates back to the times of the Ottomans, whereby the status quo is maintained unless all 3 agree to a change. Now, we've all heard stories of fights and contests among these custodians, and that's true. But in the past 20 years, prodded no doubt by Israeli authorities, they have worked together for substantial repair and renovation of this building. Well, after leaving the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and its associated craziness, you probably want to visit a lovely, more traditional Christian church. And if so, go visit St. Anne's Church. St. Anne's is actually in the Muslim quarter in the northeast corner of the old city. It's a Crusader church that was rehabilitated in the 19th century when it was returned by the Ottomans. It is a beautiful, wonderful place of prayer and song. We on both of our pilgrimages, we visited the church and we sang in the church. It has wonderful acoustics. In addition, on the grounds of the church are the excavated remains of the pool by the sheep gate, where Jesus healed the paralytic, as the story is told in the 5th chapter of John's Gospel. From St. Anne's, you may walk the Via Dolorosa. This is the traditional walk from Jesus' place of condemnation to Golgotha. Now, the Franciscans developed this liturgy, and it has become the Stations of the Cross. The 14 stations are marked on the street. Here's an example. And the earlier stations have small chapels, such as this one, that are open for prayer. The later stations, like nailing to the cross and the death of Jesus, are within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. In addition to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, there is another alleged Christian tomb site in the city. It's called the Garden Tomb. It is just outside the walls of the old city. This is really a 19th century innovation, and archaeologists reject this as a possible site of Christ's tomb, but it is a lovely spot, a lovely garden. Now, of course, the neighborhoods around the old city are full of pilgrimage sites of varying degrees of authenticity. You can visit the Garden of Gethsemane, and adjacent to that, the Basilica of the Agony. Or you can visit the tomb of the Virgin Mary, or the birthplace of John the Baptist, or the site of the Upper Room. In Bethany, there is a church to commemorate the start of Jesus' Palm Sunday ride into Jerusalem. It is allegedly built over the rock where he boosted himself onto the donkey. You can visit the Paternoster Church on the Mount of Olives, which celebrates Jesus' teaching of the Lord's Prayer, although the Gospels seem clear that that teaching took place in Galilee and not in Jerusalem. Now, one of my favorite excursions in the old city is walking the city walls. These walls encircle the old city. You may enter the city only through one of its 7 gates. Now, this is a real city wall. It was laid out in a current configuration as early as the 11th century. It was rebuilt in the 16th century. This is not a Disney recreation. The wall was the actual firing line in 1948 and again in 1967 during the Arab-Israeli wars. When Kaiser Wilhelm visited Jerusalem in 1898, the Ottomans removed an entire gate and wall section at Jaffa Gate so that he and his party might ride into the city in carriages, which was otherwise impossible to do. Today, this is the only gap in the walls at Jaffa Gate. A couple other gates today do offer vehicular access, but the remaining gates, including the lovely Damascus Gate, are purely pedestrian access. To walk the walls, you need to go to Jaffa Gate in the Christian section and buy your ticket. Then you mount the wall and you walk either clockwise or counterclockwise. Now, this walk is really only for the hardy. There are stairs, there are ladders, there are turrets, and there are even firing platforms. What to visit outside the old city? Well, I, of course, already mentioned the Mount of Olives, which rises to the east of the city, and it is covered in churches. We Episcopalians want to visit St. George's Cathedral, a handsome English Gothic cathedral just north of the old city. It is the seat of the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem. Services are done in both Arabic and English. Now, the new city, West Jerusalem, the Jewish city, is just full of sights. It has many museums, shops, cafes, and hotels. It is the national capital, and the Knesset building, of course, is there. Now, we Christian pilgrims were all fascinated by the Holy Land model. The Holy Land model was constructed about 1970. It is a half acre in size. It is a Jewish reconstruction of Jerusalem as it existed maybe 20 years after Easter, built on a scale of approximately 1:50 and sitting outdoors at a Jerusalem museum. You get an excellent overview of the ancient city. And then finally, as Christian pilgrims, we should visit Yad Vashem. Yad Vashem is the great Holocaust memorial. And I have to tell you, it is a wrenching experience. I wandered through my mind myself, and I came to a vast circular hall with library shelves on the wall and a great opening in the middle that reaches below to the bedrock and above to the sky. This was as good a picture as I could take of it. I wasn't even sure what it was. I learned later that this was the Hall of Names, where an effort has been made to identify and remember my name, each one of the 6 million Jews lost in the Holocaust, or the Shoah, as Jews call it. This project so far has preserved the names of at least 4.5 million Jews lost in the Holocaust. Really, this is a necessary visit for the Holy Land pilgrim. That completes this talk on Jerusalem. The final talk will be a discussion of other sites in the Holy Land. Thank you and good day.